Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting and other wonders Propagandacast. Lehr with me, host Imperial Dane. We're off here to have a look here at the Volksgrenadiers, here clad in their lovely greatcoats. And, you know, they are basically the basic infantry of the Oberkommando West, the elite Oberkommando West. A 5-man squad, costs 240 manpower, and that's where they are pretty much standard in terms of cost. They have access to the ability to lay down sandbags, which can be quite neat. A bit of a throwback to the old Volksgrenadiers. They have access to Steel-Granate, cost 30 munitions, and they can salvage equipment for fuel as well. So in that regard, they do possess a bit of this and that. They are more durable than, say, your Grenadier squad. On the other hand, they actually do less damage. So there, of course, are some things there that get slightly awkward. Also, unlike, say, your Grenadiers, they have access to no weapon upgrades except the Panzerschreck. One Panzerschreck, they gain cold immunity, but in most maps that won't really affect anything, so you're basically paying overprice for a single Panzerschreck, which in otherwise is pretty much just a single Panzerschreck. So in that regard, they give a sort of a decent, slight anti-tank weaponry team there, but they are not going to say, you know, Panzer Grenadiers with Panzerschrecks sort of really laying down some heavy anti-tank fires already. There are some limits. A lack of light machine guns and other kind of upgrades sort of further limits them from actually being upgraded. And that's sort of also really where the problem with the Volksgrenadiers are. They are some pretty weak infantry. And you will find, in fact, that most veteran players, experienced players, will generally shift them out for either doctrinal infantry or Obersoldaten, maybe Sturmpioneers, or in fact they'll just go for Sturmpioneers right away in several large numbers and completely skip the Volksgrenadiers if possible. They rather lack in several departments. In particular, the lack of a weapon upgrade also essentially means that if you actually have to get them after a certain point in the match, you're basically wasting manpower, since they won't be able to keep up with the opponent's infantry in most regards, either through sheer veterans. Of course, they have upgrades. So that would leave your Volksgrenadiers rather behind. So generally, the current recommendation would be to get about 2 or 3 squads of them in the beginning, and then don't get any more if possible. I mean, you have one if you absolutely have it to sort of recruit weapon cheaply, but beyond that, try not to get more than them, because generally you'll find you'll hurt your economy more. Since pretty much every doctrine infantry, the Fallschirmjäger, or the Panzerfusiliers, the Jäger infantry, or just the more regular Obersoldaten, will perform better than your Volksgrenadiers. And that is rather something vital to keep in mind. And again, I mean, if you can grab, say, a BAR or a Browning light machine gun, or say a DP light machine gun from them, they actually become a lot more useful. Then they actually become a reasonably good unit once they get veterancy. And of course, yes, the level 5 veterancy. Won't you say that sort of makes up for it, Dane? Well, here's the thing. And they rather need the ability to actually get there, and that's the problem. Half the time they'll get wiped out somehow before they maybe even reach veterancy 3. In most cases, they'll stay around veterancy 2, never amounting to that many kills. And rarely, if ever, will you see them reach veterancy 5. Of course, in that case, they've become a bit tough, but even then, they can easily get wiped out by, you know, your opponent's veteran infantry if you're not careful. So there are some issues there with the Volksgrenadiers, which is rather important to keep in mind. And again, that's why you generally should not consider getting more than a few of them. Otherwise, you will basically be hurting yourself in more than one way. Their grenades are reasonably effective and well thrown, though mind you, currently they are absolutely terrible versus units in buildings. So, besides not being that strong infantry, they're not really good for flushing enemy out of buildings. And generally, in most cases, if your opponent throws a grenade at you, it will be a rarity that your troops actually get hurt in this way than not. Let's just keep it at that. And that also means basically garrisoning yourself in a building versus Volksgrenadiers is a very safe tactic most of the time, because they won't be able to do much versus you. So again, you know, they're useful for the first few minutes, and if you can in the first few minutes sort of gain them sufficient veterans, they'll be alright, but that's about it. I mean, the veterancy bonus rather gives them a lot of stat boosts as they get up. For example, veteran 3 also, they gain the ability to self-heal. They gain a lot of toughness as they veterancy up, and also get some more, you know, weapon accuracy and whatnot. But, again, that rather requires they can get, then again, that's really their Achilles heel most of the time. And they count with Pancheks, sure, to a certain extent, but that's also then investing a ton of resource into them. And even then, it's hardly a guarantee if, say, your opponent goes for a lot of infantry. So again, overall, my counter advice would be get 2 to 3 squads and replace them with our infantry as the time goes on. So be careful with the grenades out in the open, of course, but beyond that, there's not really much else to say. In particular, once, say, the American Fox, we're playing against them, get some Browning automatics or Lieutenant, well, they don't become a lot impressive. In fact, they just really quickly lose out. So again, unless you can get some kind of weapon from the opponent, which is a bit of a long stretch to hope for, they're not going to be good. And of course, as the opponent, I mean, don't take them fully lightly, but overall, keep in mind, you know, you can sort of gauge a lot of things from that. I mean, if you get several Pancheks, of course, you have to be a bit careful with your vehicles. Of course, you can sort of force your opponent's armor vehicles to be a bit careful with several Pancheks. But with sufficient armor, it's not going to be a problem. I mean, they can't really lay down any serious threats, say, versus your tanks. Light vehicles, maybe, but beyond that, it really becomes difficult as well. So in many regards, they do suffer from some slightly unfortunate issues. So, counter advice again, get 2 to 3. Don't get any more unless you really need something. You'll also more need something cheap to recruit your weapons. Otherwise, beyond that, aim for doctrinal or Obersoldaten to switch them out with in the longer run. Or hope you grab a BAR, Browning LMG, or something else. So I think that rather sums it up with the current Volksgrenadiers. I would love to say something a lot more positive with them, for example, that they also reflect their historical counterparts, which they don't, but sadly I can't at the moment. So again, best advice, 2 to 3, shift them out with something better, because ultimately in terms of manpower, in terms of doing actual damage, that will be the best decision for you. So this is Imperial Dane saying cheers. Hope you learned something from this Propagandacast Lehr. If you did, feel free to subscribe. If not, you know, feel free to suggest a topic. I'll try to do it with the replay as I can. But can, of course, just after the read, there's a bunch of patches. Of course, my replay archives get wiped pretty often, so that's a bit tricky. But still, I'll do my best. But this is Imperial Dane saying cheers, and see you tomorrow.